The world of professional sports often runs on a fragile illusion that is carefully maintained behind the scenes. Team owners, league executives, and much of the mainstream sports media want fans to believe that everyone involved is perfectly aligned. The public is constantly told that players, unions, and league leadership are all moving together toward the same bright and profitable future. Over the past year, the WNBA has been presenting exactly that kind of narrative. Fans have seen record-breaking television ratings, sold-out arenas across the country, and long-awaited charter flights finally introduced after years of complaints from players. By most mainstream accounts, the league has experienced the biggest financial and cultural surge in the history of women's sports. But if we are completely honest, much of that momentum has been fueled by the arrival of one extraordinary rookie superstar, Caitlin Clark. Her presence has dramatically increased attention on the league, bringing millions of new viewers and transforming ordinary regular season games into must-watch events. This moment should represent the beginning of a new golden era. Ideally, it would be a time when players across the league celebrate the sport's growth, secure stronger financial opportunities, and prepare for a future filled with unprecedented popularity and prosperity. However, the reality unfolding behind the scenes appears far more complicated. Instead of universal celebration, the league seems to be standing dangerously close to serious internal tension. Beneath the surface of success lies the possibility of a damaging conflict that could threaten the league's stability just as its long-awaited growth is beginning to materialize. If you assume that the upcoming collective bargaining agreement negotiations are simply about salaries, travel conditions, and standard labor issues, you may be missing the bigger picture. What appears to be developing behind closed doors resembles a much deeper struggle over influence and control. Long-standing frustrations, cultural divisions, and disagreements about the direction of the league are beginning to surface. Some veteran players appear willing to push the situation toward a high-stakes confrontation that could risk alienating the very fan base responsible for the league's recent surge in popularity. Meanwhile, much of the mainstream sports media seems reluctant to openly discuss the full complexity of these tensions. On major networks and in large sports publications, the story is usually presented in a far simpler way. The public is told that players are opting out of their current agreement in order to negotiate a more equitable share of league revenue. The situation is framed as a powerful labor movement, a fight for respect, fair compensation, and improved working conditions against wealthy team owners. At first glance, that narrative sounds inspiring and progressive, exactly the type of storyline corporate media outlets are comfortable promoting. Yet beneath that polished public image, cracks appear to be forming within the players' union itself. The long-standing image of unity and solidarity among players seems to be weakening, and a noticeable cultural divide is quietly developing inside locker rooms across the league. Veteran sports commentator Jason Whitlock has been among the few voices willing to openly discuss these deeper tensions, raising questions that many others appear hesitant to address.
And it seems like it's going to split. I don't think most people are recognizing this, but the white girls are ready to end this whole deal and sign the deal. They don't want to strike. The black girls are still holding out and they're oppressed, and they want to play this to the bust. You got Kelsey Plum, you got Brianna Stewart basically saying, hey, look, we need to play this season. It's important. We don't need to strike. And then you have
what you are witnessing may be the reality of a fractured union. This situation goes beyond a simple negotiation over revenue distribution. Instead, it resembles a much broader cultural and strategic conflict. To understand the seriousness of the moment, it helps to examine how power works within professional sports labor negotiations. In leagues like the National Basketball Association, players hold enormous negotiating leverage because the sport generates billions of dollars in guaranteed global television revenue. If NBA players were to strike, the financial consequences for team owners would be immediate and massive. Similarly, athletes in the National Football League possess tremendous influence because professional football occupies a central place in American culture. Any disruption to the league would cause widespread economic and cultural impact. Historically, however, the WNBA has operated under very different financial conditions. For many years, the league relied heavily on financial support from the NBA simply to remain operational. Because profitability remained limited for decades, WNBA players traditionally had very little negotiating leverage during collective bargaining discussions. That situation began to change dramatically with the arrival of Caitlin Clark. Almost overnight, the economic landscape surrounding the league shifted. Her popularity attracted millions of viewers and brought unprecedented media attention to the sport. Games that once struggled for national visibility suddenly became major television events. For the first time, the league appeared to possess a true superstar capable of dramatically expanding its audience and commercial value. In theory, this moment should have created an opportunity for players to negotiate from a position of growing strength. However, instead of approaching this moment with a unified strategy, internal divisions appear to have emerged within the union. Some veteran players seem determined to use this moment aggressively as leverage not only against league ownership but also against the changing dynamics created by the league's newfound popularity. Rather than presenting a single coordinated front, the situation has begun to resemble a complicated internal power struggle. This disorganization risks creating tension between union leadership and many players who are uncertain about what the future might hold.
Listen, Whitlock kept it real. I cannot believe the way these ladies are going about this. The WNBPA is an absolute disaster. They're not on the same page. They have no idea what they're doing. They have their own players that they are representing coming out and calling them greedy and selfish. You have players coming out saying, I want to play. You have middle tier players and rookies saying, I can't afford a lockout. I'm scared. All of this stuff. The WNBPA, this has been a debacle. This has been a joke.
When the everyday members of a union begin openly expressing fear about the strategy of their own leadership, the situation stops resembling a traditional labor movement. Instead, it begins to look like a deeply unstable internal conflict. Consider the perspective of a mid-tier professional player earning somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 per season. Unlike the biggest stars, she is not signing multi-million-dollar endorsement deals with major companies such as Nike or Gatorade. Her financial stability depends almost entirely on her salary from the league. For that player, the possibility of a league shutdown or lockout is not an abstract political debate. It represents a very real financial threat. Missing game checks could mean struggling to pay rent, cover basic expenses, or support family members. Yet some of the loudest voices within union leadership appear less concerned about those risks. Because many star players earn money through overseas contracts or lucrative sponsorships, they may be insulated from the immediate financial consequences of a work stoppage. Critics argue that this dynamic creates a dangerous imbalance within the union. The priorities of high-profile players may not always align with the financial realities faced by the majority of athletes in the league. At the same time, the WNBA is experiencing a level of public attention it has never seen before. That momentum has been fueled largely by the arrival of Caitlin Clark, whose popularity has drawn millions of new fans into the sport. To understand why tensions are escalating, it is important to examine the broader power structure that governs professional sports leagues. Typically, three major groups share influence: league leadership, team ownership, and the players' union. In a healthy system, those groups compete aggressively during negotiations but ultimately recognize their shared interest in protecting the long-term success of the league. After all, the entire ecosystem depends on fans who buy tickets, watch games on television, and support the sport financially. The WNBA has recently taken a major step forward with a new media rights agreement reportedly worth more than $2 billion over 11 years. While that figure represents a significant improvement over previous deals, spreading the revenue across more than a decade and multiple teams means it does not instantly transform the league into the financial powerhouse of the NBA. Expectations must still be balanced against economic reality. Another important factor is fan perception. Many of the new fans who filled arenas this past season were drawn in by the excitement of watching a generational talent perform on the court. Their primary interest was basketball, not labor negotiations or political conflict. If those fans lose the opportunity to watch their favorite players on television, there is a risk that some of them could simply move on to other sports or entertainment options. These tensions highlight the delicate balance the league must maintain as it continues navigating one of the most transformative moments in its history.
He wants to have happen.
Are still not making enough, that middleman potentially still not making enough for housing to also be taken off of the table. You all know this New York market. that $200,000 jump that players are going to make, that's before taxes, that's before what they would have to pay for a potential. I think there's a lot more that we can.
Before moving forward, it is important to pause and carefully think about what was just said. A professional athlete publicly arguing that a $200,000 salary increase still feels inadequate because of taxes and housing costs is a serious public relations mistake. In professional sports, public sympathy from fans is incredibly important during labor disputes. History has shown how damaging these situations can become. When players in Major League Baseball went on strike in 1994, the popularity of the sport took a massive hit for years. Many working-class fans simply could not relate to millionaires and billionaires arguing over revenue distribution. The WNBA operates with far less margin for losing fan goodwill. The average American household earns roughly $75,000 per year. When a professional athlete appears on television suggesting that $200,000 is essentially an unfair or inadequate salary, the reaction from the public is rarely supportive. Instead of creating solidarity with fans, comments like that can generate frustration and resentment. WNBA legend Rebecca Lobo recently pointed out that this kind of messaging risks pushing away the very audience the league needs in order to grow and survive. Some veteran players appear to be operating inside an echo chamber where they have convinced themselves that they are indispensable figures in the sports industry. In reality, professional athletes are entertainers performing for an audience. If that audience feels alienated, the financial foundation of the entire league becomes unstable. Entertainment economics follow a simple rule: once fans walk away, the revenue disappears. Yet the faction pushing aggressively toward a potential strike seems willing to take that risk. This leads to one of the most controversial theories circulating around the current WNBA situation. Some observers believe the looming strike threat may not be a simple miscalculation but a deliberate strategic move. Think about it for a moment. The veteran players leading the push toward a possible lockout are not uninformed. They have agents, financial advisors, and legal representation. They understand the financial projections for the league. They know that a strike could seriously damage the momentum the sport has recently gained. So the obvious question becomes, why take that risk at all? One possible explanation is rooted in control and influence. For many years, veteran players were the dominant figures in a relatively small sports landscape. The WNBA was their domain. They shaped the culture of the league, controlled many of the narratives, and held a central position in the spotlight. The league may not have been generating massive profits or national attention, but it remained their stage. Then everything changed with the arrival of Caitlin Clark. The rookie from Iowa did not simply bring new attention to the league, she transformed the entire conversation around women's basketball. Her games attracted massive television audiences, her popularity drove ticket sales, and her presence brought new corporate endorsements and media coverage. In many ways, her arrival reshaped the hierarchy of the league almost overnight. The spotlight that once belonged to veteran stars suddenly shifted toward a new generation led by Clark. Some critics believe that this sudden shift created deep resentment among certain players who felt their influence slipping away. According to this controversial theory, pushing for a strike could potentially halt the momentum surrounding Clark and disrupt the wave of new attention entering the league. In this interpretation, the collective bargaining dispute becomes more than just a negotiation tool, it becomes a means of reclaiming control over the league's direction. Whether that theory is accurate or not, the situation has clearly created a tense and uncertain environment around the future of the WNBA.
There's a bunch of other players like that in the WNBA, that those players are illogical and will push this to the brink. Because again, it's not about making money. It's not about being treated fairly. It's about staying on message and proving that they're oppressed and that the white man and the white woman is oppressing them. They'll blow this thing up. I would not be surprised.
They're already blowing it up. Like, what are we talking
If the most pessimistic predictions prove true, the consequences could be severe. When a labor union begins prioritizing ideological goals over economic stability, traditional business logic often breaks down. A rational business strategy focuses on maximizing revenue while minimizing risk. An ideological strategy, however, may prioritize disruption or symbolic victories even when the financial consequences are severe. This is the uncomfortable possibility currently facing the WNBA. League ownership and more moderate players may find themselves negotiating with a group that views confrontation as a necessary step rather than a last resort. The potential damage from a prolonged lockout would extend far beyond the players themselves. Mid-level athletes who depend on their salaries could face serious financial hardship. Arena employees who rely on game day shifts might lose crucial income. Broadcasting partners could be left with empty programming slots if games disappear from the schedule. At the center of this situation is the fan base. Ultimately, sports leagues survive only because people choose to watch them. The WNBA has only recently begun capturing widespread mainstream attention. Much of that attention has been driven by the excitement surrounding players like Caitlin Clark. If a labor dispute removes that excitement from television screens for an extended period of time, there is a real possibility that some fans could lose interest and move on to other forms of entertainment. The stakes are extremely high. If the league were to lose the momentum it has built, the consequences could ripple through television contracts, team finances, and long-term league stability. Networks might demand compensation for lost programming. Owners facing continued financial losses could reconsider their investment in certain franchises. What should be remembered as the most successful era in WNBA history could instead become a turning point defined by internal conflict. For now, the future remains uncertain. The tension behind the scenes continues to grow while much of the mainstream media focuses on simplified narratives. The key question remains unanswered. Will cooler heads prevail and protect the progress the league has made, or will internal divisions push the WNBA toward a crisis that could undo years of growth? The conversation is far from over. Fans will ultimately play a major role in shaping what happens next.